Now, the title of this video is a joke, but there may be more truth to it than you would originally think, because Bungie recently revealed its entry into the extraction shooter genre with its upcoming game called Marathon, and this marks the first real AAA game coming into the extraction shooter genre. And I think this also marks the first real competition for Escape from Tarkov. Now, Marathon is a first-person extraction shooter where you play as a mercenary called a runner, where you compete for survival, riches, and renown in a world of evolving persistent zones where any run can lead to greatness. And it's currently being developed for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC with full crossplay and cross-save. A lot of this being first for the extraction shooter genre. And Marathon is looking to take a lot of the depth and complexity of the extraction shooter genre and buff out a lot of the rough edges, making it a much more smooth and understandable experience, and to keep the focus of the game on the gameplay itself and less about trying to manage your loadouts and taking 30 minutes to get into a match. And if you played any of the main extraction shooters, Marathon is going to share a lot of that base gameplay, but with some pretty interesting additions all wrapped up in Bungie's amazing gunplay. And as a runner, you'll be choosing your loadout, grouping up with up to 2 of your friends, and dropping into massive persistent zones where you're going to be looking for loot, artifacts, and looking for other runners to fight, with the main objective of extracting at the end to keep everything you've gathered throughout that run. And while you're out there in your runs scavenging for loot, you'll be able to find things like weapons, implants to further customize your character, healing supplies, and even artifacts that you can combine together to create larger and more valuable artifacts, maxing out at what they're calling prime artifacts. And we actually don't know what these artifacts are actually going to entail. These just seem to be one of the main things you're searching for outside of the usable loot you're going to be finding. But if you die in a run, you're going to lose everything on that character, which is a hallmark of the extraction shooter genre. But Marathon is doing something a little bit more interesting in explaining how you can continuously die over and over again. The By 2850 clone technology allows a person to reliably shift their consciousness from their born body to a new synthetic body and back again. So this is how death is going to work in the game. You're not actually using your own body, you're shifting your consciousness into a new synthetic body that you bring into the runs. So when you die, you just wake up in your actual body. And I also think that this is how they're going to go about more permanent character progression, because your born body can continue to learn new skills and improve upon your combat, while these synthetic bodies are the things dying. And we haven't gotten a ton of information on this, but I would fully expect there to be quite a lot of more long-term permanent character progression in Marathon, even just based off of Bungie developing it and their only other current game being Destiny 2, a game that is fully focused on very long-term progression. And there's going to be many different systems you have to manage while out in a run, because not only are you going to have to be searching for weapons, searching for implants, searching for these artifacts and other different resources, but you're also going to have to be searching for healing supplies because you have to manage your health after taking damage from combat. There's said to also be things like injuries in these runs, so you're going to have to find different healing supplies if you get yourself injured. Then there's also going to be an oxygen management system. It also seems to play the role as match length, because since you're dropping into persistent zones, something akin to how the cycle does their matches, that zone itself sounds like it won't have a timer, but the amount of oxygen you have will be your timer. And presumably you'll be able to maybe find additional oxygen while you're in a run. You may be able to bring more oxygen into a run, allowing you to stay in longer, possibly loot more, or even get into more fights. And they are following in the footsteps of the rest of the genre, where they'll have things called contracts that seem to be just their version of quests or missions or bounties that give you some objective to do while out in your runs. But they also did talk about wanting to remove a lot of the tedium and more boring aspects of systems like this. So presumably a lot of these objectives aren't going to be super tedious like a lot of the tasks you're going to find in something like Escape from Tarkov. Now, Marathon is also being advertised as the ultimate live service game with a focus on seasonal content, so it's most likely being built off of how Destiny 2 releases all of its content, with a full focus on very consistent seasons. And we didn't get much information on this, but one of the most interesting parts of this more live service focus is how they're going to go about releasing new zones into the game. Because as I explained, players are actually going to have to figure out how to open up the new zone or playable areas that are released, and then they're also going to have to figure out how to open that zone for all of the other players. And they gave the example of maybe you find this hidden key that opens up a special door that allows you to go into the newly released playable space. Then after you enter that, you would have to figure out a way to allow all other players of the game to be able to also enter that new zone, with the developers even specifically mentioning the possibility of teams getting the world first for unlocking this new content. So I think a big focus of Marathon is going to be having these persistent living worlds where players actually have to figure out how to unlock the new content, the new playable areas, and potentially even things like new guns or character customization. Now, as somebody who's played a lot of Escape from Tarkov, one of the most promising pieces of the reveal of this game has been how they're talking about the more back-end systems. So Marathon is going to boast dedicated servers, which is sure to make Destiny 2 players jealous. They're going to have a fog of war system, and they're going to have disconnection recovery, presumably being if you disconnect and die, you'll be able to recover the stuff you lost based upon that being a disconnect. They're also going to have a dedicated security team. And if you're an Escape from Tarkov player, this dedicated security team is probably the most exciting part about Marathon so far. One of the biggest issues in the history of Tarkov has been cheaters, and much more so in the most recent wipe. So a massive AAA studio like Bungie having an actual full team dedicated to security, anti-cheats, and removing hackers is one of the biggest boons for this game, especially when comparing to Escape from Tarkov. Now, information from Marathon has been pretty slim, but I think if they can keep that deep, complex gameplay of other extraction shooters like Escape from Tarkov while buffing out the rough edges and keeping the gameplay meaningful and intense, they're going to have a winner on their hands. Because I don't think any fans of the extraction shooter genre want a super watered down extraction shooter where the matches don't feel intense and the loot doesn't feel that meaningful. But I think I speak for a lot of EFT players when I say it will be a very good thing for them to buff out a lot of those rough edges and remove a lot of the tedium that comes with EFT, having a much bigger focus on quickly getting into matches, staying in the gameplay, and focusing on that PvP combat. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.